This is Jarrod Horak, and in this video, I'm going to look back at all 20 Kentucky Derby runners, see what's next for them, and then I'm going to preview the Preakness Stakes. In the Kentucky Derby, we had a lively pace, and none of the pace horses were around at the end, and the fractions were 22.97, 46.63, 111.31 for the 6 furlongs, and one horse was in a great spot, saving ground behind those fractions, just waiting to pounce, and that horse was Mystik Dan under Brian Hernandez Jr. from Post 3. He was 18-1, and he was working out a great trip. He slipped through along the inside and opened up a clear lead in the stretch, and then he had to hold off the late charges of Sierra Leone and Forever Young, and he just did last. 3 horses across the line at the finish, and it was Mystik Dan on the inside by a nose over Sierra Leone, with Forever Young another nose back in third. Now for Mystik Dan, excellent training job for trainer Kenny McPeak to have him ready to run a peak race on the first Saturday in May. So he had a big performance in him, just like Torpedo Anna in the Kentucky Oaks that McPeak trained to victory on Friday, the day before the Derby. This horse was ready to roll too. So Kenny McPeak had his horses in these big races ready to run the race of their lives. And that's exactly what they did. And for Mystik Dan, the Preakness is not a definite at this point. We'll have to see which direction they go. They're going to wait and then decide. The Preakness will be on May 18th, and then the Preakness draw, they're going to draw the field on May 13th, sometime later in the day that day. And then I think Kenny McPeak's going to wait till draw day to decide that does he want to enter the Preakness or is he going to target the Belmont Stakes. Now the Belmont Stakes is going to be at Saratoga in June instead of Belmont Park because Belmont Park's undergoing construction. The Belmont Stakes is usually at 1.5 miles. This year it will be at 1.25 miles at Saratoga, a better distance for Mystik Dan, thinks his trainer, Kenny McPeak. So they could have a fresh horse for the Belmont, or they're going to run him back in the Preakness. We'll have to see what they decide to do in the coming days. Now, Sierra Leone, he ran a winning race in the Kentucky Derby, but he was his own worst enemy. He actually worked out a decent closing trip from Post 2. I wasn't concerned about the post. I know some people thought Post 2, he can't win from there, but it was not an issue. They have that new starting gate at Churchill Downs that they started using in 2020. They don't use that auxiliary gate anymore. And that new starting gate gives all of the horses plenty of room. And for Sierra Leone, good effort. He was wide, but that was okay that he was wide. When you're betting a closer in a 20-horse field, you're not going to have a perfect trip as a closer. But Sierra Leone worked out a decent enough trip, had every chance to run down Mystik Dan, but he kept lugging in. That's his Achilles heel. He's done that in multiple races. And now when he was stepping up in facing the deepest field of his career, he was lugging in, and that cost him this time because if he would have kept a straight line, there was a likely possibility that he was going to be passing Mystik Dan and winning the Derby, but he didn't, and that cost him the race, and he ended up finishing second. Now they're going to ship him to Saratoga, and they're going to target the Belmont Stakes. The Sierra Leone is going to be a formidable foe in that race. Now, I mentioned that in a video I did after the Derby yesterday. I did a quick recap video of the Derby, previewed the next 2 Triple Crown races, and I said that Sierra Leone would skip the Preakness, run in the Belmont, and then I pegged him as the early Belmont Stakes winner. We'll have to see in a few weeks if that happens or not, but he's targeting the Belmont Stakes. Then we have Forever Young. He ran a good closing race. He was bumping with Sierra Leone in the stretch, and he just missed in a quality effort his first lifetime loss. As for Sierra Leone, he's lost twice, and he lost by a nose twice. Forever Young was 5 for 5 heading into this race, and then he lost this one by 2 noses. So for Forever Young, he's returning to Japan. We'll have to see if they don't come back for the Breeders' Cup Classic later this year. That's what they did with Derma Sotogake last year, the UAE Derby winner from last year. He ended up running 6th in the Kentucky Derby, and then he came back for the Breeders' Cup Classic later in the fall, and he ended up finishing 2nd in that race. We'll see if Forever Young doesn't come back for the Breeders' Cup. Catching Freedom was 4th. He's possible for the Preakness Stakes still. He ran an okay race for trainer Brad Cox, Flavian Pratt riding, and they're going to monitor him, see how he comes out of this race, take a look at the Preakness field, and see if that's something that they would like to do. Now, finishing out the super high 5, and it was a huge super high 5, paying over $300,000, was T.O. Password from Japan. One of the longer shots in the race. He only had 2 lifetime starts heading into the Kentucky Derby, and he ran a decent race from off the pace. Considering it was only his third lifetime start, nothing wrong with finishing 5th. He's returning to Japan, and I wonder if he's one that could come back for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Resilience was 6th for trainer Belmont, and he made a menacing move like he was going to possibly be in contention for the win around the far turn into the top of the stretch. But he couldn't keep it going, and he weakened late, and he finished 6th. So Belmont thinks 1.25 miles is too far for him, and he said no Preakness, no Belmont Stakes for Resilience. 7th place was Stronghold, and he was a pace casualty in this race for trainer Phil D'Amato, and he's going to head back to California, and D'Amato said some stake starts later this year. They haven't mapped out any plan up to this point. Honor Marie was 8th, just couldn't quicken enough in the stretch, and he ran okay in a 20-horse field, finishing 8th. It's not a disgrace. The Belmont Stakes is a possibility for him if he trains well. Now, Endlessly was 9th, and it's not surprising that he wasn't quick enough to pass all the horses. Not an embarrassing effort at all. His first start on conventional dirt, he did all of his damage on all-weather ground and turf in all of his other starts. He had the action of a turf horse. I mentioned that in his workouts. And for him, they're going back to the turf, and that's exactly what you thought they would do. They took a shot in the Derby. It didn't work out. Now they can go back to the turf. The Belmont Derby at Aqueduct on July 6th is a summertime target for him. Finishing 10th in the Kentucky Derby was Dornoch, and he figured to be a pace presence from the inside post, but he wasn't, and he didn't have a great trip sitting in mid-pack. So for him, it just didn't work out at all. But even if he was a pace factor in this race, he probably would have been a horse that would have been a pace casualty because all the other horses up on the pace ended up finishing up the track. So Dornoch is possible for the Belmont Stakes. Maybe that race will work out better for him if they end up going there. We'll have to see how he trains heading up into the Belmont Stakes. Now, Track Phantom was 11th, a pace casualty for trainer Steve Asmussen, and he's been in steady training since October of 2023. So if there was ever a horse that deserved a little bit of a break before he had maybe a summer campaign, Track Phantom is that horse. West Saratoga was just overmatched. He finished 12th. He needs an easier spot. Behind him, a domestic product for trainer Chad Brown. This was his first start in 8 weeks, and he was going from 1 mile and a 16th, or back-to-back mile and a 16th races that had slow early, fast late pace scenarios, right into 1.25 mile race off of workouts, and he just didn't have it, and he ended up finishing 13th in this race. For him, probably a shorter distance, maybe some easier company as well. He still remains at least a decent, promising sort under the right circumstances. If he can find a stakes race that doesn't have as much depth as this race had, and maybe a little bit shorter, he could do some damage. Epic Ride, he was next. He was a pace casualty. He had an impossible post position. He could be better on synthetic ground. No word on what's next for him. Fierceness, the big disappointment in the race. Not surprised that he didn't finish in the money, though. He was one of those kind of horses, and we talked about that. Now, for Fierceness, every other race he was firing, and when things go perfectly for him, he's brilliant. Other times, he's not nearly brilliant. His debut, he romped, he was outstanding. And then in his second career start in the Champagne Stakes, he didn't have a great start. He finished up the track, bounced back in a big way in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He was your 2-year-old champion after romping in that race. And then in his first start as a 3-year-old in the Holy Bull Stakes, very slow pace. He did not have a great start. He ended up finishing a disappointing 3rd in that race. Florida Derby, he was able to get right out there and control the pace against overmatched rivals, and he romped that day. So you can see his every other race pattern. And then it came to the Kentucky Derby, and he had a big workout. And I mentioned in that workout that was very controlled, a slow 4 furlongs and a strong gallop out. I said that workout reminded me of the Florida Derby, where he got out there and he was able to get into a nice controlled gallop. And then he just romped in the stretch and had plenty of energy. Well, that's what he did in his workout. Nice, slow 4 furlongs, plenty of energy at the end. In this race, his start wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, and he was right up on the pace, but he was a pace casualty in this race, and he threw in one of his bad efforts. So now they're going to regroup. They're going to go to Saratoga. They're going to see if he trains well, and if he does, maybe they're going to target the Belmont Stakes. He's one that's more than capable of winning one of these big races, if he can get the right kind of race flow and he can just get out there and control the pace. He's capable of romping, but then he's also capable of what he's done 3 times, which is finish a disappointing effort off the board as the favorite. That's what he did here. He was one of those horses that could have won or finished up the track, and he finished up the track. Society Man finished behind Fierceness. He had a bad post and he wasn't good enough. Just Steel was a pace casualty for D. Wayne Lucas. And then we had Grand Mo the first, Catalytic, and then your last place finisher, just as disappointing as Fierceness, Just a Touch. Lightly raced for trainer Brad Cox. He's one that showed a lot of ability in his 3 starts, but the Kentucky Derby was probably too much for him in his 4th career start. He looked very good, winning a fast race in his sprint debut on a wet track. Then he was 2nd in the Gotham Stakes. And then in his 3rd start, it was a fast pace, and he raced hard throughout in the Bluegrass Stakes, finishing a clear 2nd behind Sierra Leone. And then in this race, he just didn't have it at all. And now I think that they probably want to regroup with him, give him a little bit of time off, bring him back later this year, and he's still a horse that could be a decent 3-year-old. So the horses that are still possible for the Preakness Stakes that ran in the Kentucky Derby at this early stage, Mystik Dan, the winner, and then Catching Freedom. So they seem to be the 2 most likely horses that could move on to the Preakness, but that's not a guarantee at this point. But the fresh faces that are targeting the Preakness Stakes up to this point, Muth for trainer Bob Baffert, 2-time Grade 1 winner. He won the Grade 1 American Pharaoh Stakes as a 2-year-old. He was 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and then he won the San Vicente Stakes this year, and then he won the Arkansas Derby, the Grade 1, and he defeated Mystik Dan by more than 6 lengths in that race. And Muth is training forwardly for the Preakness Stakes. He's fresh. He would have obviously been one of the favorites for the Kentucky Derby, but his trainer Bob Baffert's horses have been banned from the Kentucky Derby for the last few years. They extended that ban through 2024, so that meant that Muth couldn't run in the Derby, but he's been targeting the Preakness for quite some time. He hasn't run since March 30th, and he's one that's going to be fresh and dangerous and an early pressing presence in the Preakness Stakes. His trainer Bob Baffert has won the Preakness at least 8 times, and Muth is going to be a strong contender for the Preakness Stakes. And I said in my video yesterday that I did after the Derby that he was going to be the Preakness favorite, and he's likely to win the Preakness Stakes as well. Now, Imagination, stablemate to Muth, 2nd in the Santa Anita Derby behind Stronghold last time out. He's another one that's very consistent, always finishes 1st or 2nd. Frankie Dettori is his rider. He's training well. He's one that he hasn't put it all together yet. I think he has a little more in the tank, but he's been very consistent. He's got good speed. He just needs to be able to take the switch and turn it off a little bit. He gets a bit keyed up sometimes, and if you can keep him relaxed, he's one that can run a quality race. Copper Tax, a local horse, won the Federico Tessio Stakes. He's won a bunch of stakes races for trainer Gary Capuano. Gary Capuano trained Captain Badgett in the Triple Crown Series a few years back. And Copper Tax is one that he's got a lot of ability, but when he's faced better graded horses, he just hasn't stepped up and done it yet. Now, Seize the Gray, he's one that's possible for trainer D. Wayne Lucas. He won the Grade 3 Pat Day Mile on the Kentucky Derby undercard on May 4th. And Seize the Gray, he came back this year faster than he was as a 2-year-old. So he's making progress, and we'll have to see how Seize the Gray does if they go in the Kentucky Derby. He would be a long shot, but he's one that he has at least enough tactical speed, and trainer D. Wayne Lucas has a lot of experience winning the Preakness Stakes. Informed Patriot, he's another one that could end up going in the Preakness, and we'll have to see if they go there. And there's a couple other names that have been floated around as Preakness possibilities. Uncle Heavy, and then Tuscan Gold for trainer Chad Brown. Tuscan Gold was 3rd in the Louisiana Derby. He's one that has a lot of ability. He's lightly raced, and he's got stamina, and he's got some tactical speed. So he could be interesting, and Chad Brown's had a lot of success in the Preakness Stakes the last few years. And also, though, on May 11th, this coming Saturday, they're running the Peter Pan Stakes, a prep race for the Belmont Stakes at Aqueduct. And for the Peter Pan, Uncle Heavy and Tuscan Gold are possible for that race too. So they're going to take a look at the Preakness to see which horses are pointing to that. They're going to look at the Peter Pan. They're going to decide which race is best for their charge. If I had to guess right now, I would say that Tuscan Gold maybe would run in the Preakness because Chad Brown's had that Preakness success. His other horse, Sierra Leone's pointing to the Belmont, so maybe they're going to try to win the Preakness Stakes with Tuscan Gold. That would be my guess at this point. Now I'm going to be offering my annual Preakness Day full card. Preakness is my hometown race. I've had a lot of success in the Preakness Stakes, and I'm going to be doing my annual full card. You can find that at therunawayhorse.com on my sales page. And I had winning tickets in the Preakness Stakes in 2015 and 16, in 2018, and then 21, 22, and 23. So I've nailed it the last 3 years. I've had a lot of success recently, and I've had a lot of long-term success dating all the way back to my first Preakness in 1980. So I've had a lot of experience with the Preakness. I've been to Pimlico a lot, and I do well with that Preakness full card. I had a bunch of top choice winners on my Preakness full card last year, did very well with those undercard races. Kentucky Oaks Day, I had 5 top choice winners. Preakness for Kentucky Derby Day, I had 6 top choice winners. So I've had a lot of success in these full cards, and hopefully this year it'll be more of the same. And if you're interested in a bonus free pick every day, you can go over to therunawayhorse.com and click on my daily free pick blog. It's called Better Bets. You'll see the tab at the top of my website. Click there. Every day I post a free play from around the country, the Better Bets blog at therunawayhorse.com. And that'll do it for this video. I'll keep checking my YouTube channel. I got a lot of Preakness coverage planned. And until I see you next time, good luck at the races.